What's up, guys? It's three-time NFL Pro Bowler, all-decade return specialist, Josh Cribbs. I want to welcome you to the College Sports Connection podcast, where Double A, Alex, and AJ host the Mid-American Conference Best.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the College Sports Connection podcast. I'm your host, Alex the Captain. Joining me as always, AJ the Guru.
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
AJ, welcome back. Last week we had a phenomenal time talking to Sarah Tisdale from Central Michigan Lacrosse. Great conversation. Really neat learning about what's going on with a new lacrosse program and now kicking off the first year of lacrosse in the MAC. Really excited to see what happens there.
Absolutely, that was fun. It was I was a little knowledgeable about lacrosse, but it was nice to get a more in-depth conversation about it and what Coach Tisdale is doing up with that program.
Sure.
And, it seems like they're growing the sport, and they're doing a great job of it, so it's going to be a lot of fun to keep track of here for the years to come.
Absolutely. And I think, that'll be one of those things, like you said, good thing to keep track of, kind of keep an eye on. But now, knowing, as most of our followers know, we primarily focus on the MAC. This week, we're shifting our attention to another Midwest conference, the Big Ten Conference. We got football starting Friday night. I'm excited.
We do, yeah. The Big Ten finally kicks off Friday night with Wisconsin, Illinois visiting Wisconsin. And it's an 8 o'clock kickoff there on Friday night, which will be fun. Finally getting to some Big Ten football with the MAC the week after, right?
Yeah, MAC starts on a classic Tuesday night. We get some action. So I'm pumped for that. But this week, it's all Big Ten. So I guess let's dive into it. I know we wanted to talk about some previews, some schedule things, storylines. Yeah. So AJ, I'll kind of let you kick it off and we can just kind of go down the list and see.
Yeah. So, heck, let's start with Friday night. Number 14, Wisconsin. Iowa comes to town. That's at 8 o'clock on Friday night. Did I say Iowa or Illinois?
You said Iowa.
I said Iowa. Yeah, Illinois, sorry. Illinois heads to Madison. Wisconsin's 20-point favorites there on Friday night. Wisconsin starts the year off ranked 14th. And looking here at the matchup predictor, it's pretty, I guess everybody can assume here Wisconsin is favored 93.9 to 6.1. I have the over-under here at 51. And, Wisconsin. But, we talk about this game, and we can go back to last year, for example, in Champaign. Illinois did win that game on a last-second field goal.
Yes, they did.
Which the Big Ten West was already a crapshoot last year, and that just made things worse because that week before, or the week after that game, Wisconsin came to Ohio State, and that game did not mean as much as what they thought originally would. But obviously, Wisconsin still ended up beating Minnesota and going to the Big Ten championship. But nevertheless, the Illinois Fighting Lovie Smiths down Champaign, they're one of those teams that will show up and they'll play competitive, or they won't show up at all. Like there's really no in between with that program.
Sure, yeah, and I think that's been kind of the story of Illinois football, right? Is they'll have a few seasons here and there where they're really good. Like you remember the Ron Zook era back when they beat Ohio State in a huge upset down in Columbus. Yeah, went on to play the Rose Bowl. I think they ended up losing to USC.
Yeah, Juice
Williams. Yeah. Oh man, that's a throwback name.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of Illinois' story, right? Is that they don't do a lot of things beyond an occasional good season where they'll win the Big Ten or be really competitive in the conference. I think this one's going to be really interesting though, because Wisconsin did lose this game last year. That now they're going to be up in Wisconsin. They're going to be up in Camp Randall. This one is not going to have the fans behind it, but Wisconsin's out for revenge.
Absolutely. I'm looking at their depth chart here. They're going to have changes at quarterback. Possibly change at quarterback because Jack Cohen did get hurt this offseason. Yep. But the big story is running back. Jonathan Taylor, who was arguably one of, if not the best running back in college football last year, gets drafted in the second round to Indianapolis. So Watson seems to be filling in up there. Nika Watson with Garrett Grochek behind him. And, Wisconsin struggled last year at the offensive line position extremely because, you look at Wisconsin football, and the reason the running backs have been so good is because they have a great offensive line.
Exactly.
Towards the later end of last year, that line started getting beat up on a little bit. They
Mm-hmm.
were a young squad, but I
Yeah.
think those guys having a full year of practice, or excuse me, of playing and coming into a new season, I think that's a great comfort for the running back Watson coming in. And I think it's going to be the first couple of weeks here are going to be really telling into what happens here in the Big Ten, especially with a team like Wisconsin, who's always in contention in the West. Because we can be honest here, the West isn't that competitive outside of Wisconsin and Minnesota, maybe Iowa. But outside of that, there's not a whole lot going on there.
Well, exactly. And that's always kind of that tale of that division. The way the divisions are set up are so not good, I guess is a fair way to say it. I think that when they were the leaders in the Legends divisions, I felt like that was a much better setup for cross-divisional play and for parity within the division.
Yeah. Leaders and Legends was just a terrible name.
It was an awful name.
I don't know how they got away with doing that. But, Illinois, Wisconsin, starting Friday night, prime time on Big Ten Network. Excited to get into that.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go down here, Rutgers and Michigan State. This one's interesting, too. Two new head coaches, well, kind of new for Rutgers.
Mm-hmm.
Greg Schiano comes back after a couple of years away.
Yep.
Sparty, and a new head coach also. D'Antonio, he leaves. Kind of in scandal, but not in scandal last year. I don't really know what happened. I don't think anybody really knows what happened up there.
Yeah, I don't think it's one of those things that I people like to assume a lot of things, but there's so much speculation that nobody really knows for sure.
Exactly. And, Rutgers, too, at this point, they were one of the teams that I think was, early on in COVID cases, they were a hotbed.
Mm-hmm.
So they were probably one of the reasons why football was delayed, because I'm pretty sure at least more than half of their team tested positive. They weren't doing a good job of doing what they were supposed to be doing. So they finally got that under control, which is good. Mel Tucker, he comes into East Lansing this year. I believe he's a Sparty alum, isn't he?
Yeah, from what I was reading when we talked about him not too long ago, it looked like he was a Sparty alum, played there in the 70s. So played quarterback, I want to say, played quarterback in the 70s. So.
But yeah, he comes back. He comes from Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
So back to East Lansing and back into Big Ten football. And this is going to be, I think this is actually a very intriguing game too, because Michigan State has been down the past few years.
Yeah.
They haven't played to that Michigan State potential as they always have, because they're always in contention in the East. They always have been.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where, it depends on who shows up on Saturday. Yeah, that is a Saturday game. Yeah. So really just depends on who shows up. But I think that game being at Sparty does help.
Well, I think so. And I think now this is where I could see this being a little bit of a trap game for Michigan State, right? You've got a lot of guys who haven't bought into this new coach's system yet, not because of the coach, but because they haven't had their spring practices. They haven't had their tune-up games with, the lesser opponents from non-conference play. Like they were scheduled to play Toledo this year. So I think there's a lot of things that worked against them in terms of prepping for this. I think that everybody, probably save Ohio State, and we'll get to them in a minute, is nobody's really ready to kick off the season with a conference opponent.
Mm-hmm.
But Ohio State's done it a couple different times with Indiana the last few years. So Ohio State already knows they're already in that mindset. It's like, this first game, we got to come out firing on all cylinders. These other schools, they're like, we're used to a warm-up game. We're used to a tune-up against a 1AA opponent or a MAC opponent or a Sun Belt, somebody that's not Big Ten. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Sparty comes out and reacts right away with a new coach who they haven't had a lot of time with, how Rutgers comes out with Greg Schiano now back under the direction of the team. It's going to be really interesting to see how this game plays out. I think Sparty wins it. However, I do think this is going to be a closer game than what people are going to give it credit for.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Sparty, I believe, they'll have a new quarterback behind center this year. And, not having that off season technically hurts that quarterback relationship, especially when you're new coming onto the field. So I'm really curious to see what they do. Move down the list here. Penn State at IU. Penn State's favored by 6.5. This is a trap game for Penn State, I think.
Agreed.
Because IU is one of those teams, like, they'll play tough. They play 3.5 quarters of good football.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
The second half of the fourth quarter, they usually just kind of fall out.
Mhm.
But they're a team that once they can learn to finish and learn to win, they will be competitive in the Big Ten. But yeah, starting off with number 8 Penn State coming to town, it's a tough challenge. Obviously, you're only playing a conference schedule, but having a top 10 team coming right to your house, week 1 here, the over under is 59, and I think that's something that'll hit fairly easily. Looking at some of the scores from these past games. But yeah, I think IU can play them tough. I still think Penn State comes out on top, but I think this game's a lot closer than what people think.
For sure. IU is such a tricky program, right? I mean, they came off of their first bowl season in quite a while last season, losing to Tennessee down in the Outback Bowl. It was the Outback Bowl, right?
No.
Gator
Bowl, maybe?
Gator Bowl, okay.
Yeah.
It was some bowl game in Florida. I know that much. But I mean, they come in after that season. It was a phenomenal season for them by IU standards, right? Penn State not reaching the goals that they had set last year. I think Penn State is starting to come back down to earth a little bit as a program. I know James Franklin is really, really trying to keep those guys fired up, but Penn State lost some games I think they probably shouldn't have, or at least allowed themselves to lose games they shouldn't have. And now they're out here doing it all again, just trying to figure out what they're doing, trying to figure out how they're going to do it. This is going to be a fun one to watch. It's going to be interesting to see how Indiana responds with a new quarterback, because they had all that quarterback controversy last year. It's going to be interesting to see who kind of rises to the top and says, all right, this is my team. Let's go do this.
It really is. And, if you haven't been, for Big Ten fans, if you haven't been down to Bloomington to a game, you got to go. Memorial Stadium's an absolute blast. I've been down there too many times to count. Not just for Ohio State games. I've seen Ball State down there. I've seen Virginia down there. I think I've seen Penn State maybe once. But I've seen a lot of teams, and Bloomington's a great college town in general.
Mm-hmm.
It is an absolute blast. And but yeah, it's one of those games like we talked about. IU needs to learn how to finish games, because what happens is at halftime, the student section sobers up and they leave the game. They don't come back in.
Unfortunately.
Right. And so then once IU football, because they have such a huge, strong basketball tradition, once football comes up, and I think they will, I think they're on the rise. They just got to, tweak a few things here and there. But like I said, they got to finish games. So once they start finishing games, I'm not going to say they'll contend, but they'll be competitive in the Big Ten.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing is, for them, Indiana's not a school, like you said, is not a football school. To be competitive is really just all they want at this point. They realize what they have on the line, and they're like, you know what? If we can just go out and give teams a game, that's all we want. And they've done that. Like you said, they just fall apart in the third and fourth quarters.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be a fun game to watch for sure.
Absolutely. We're going to go down the list here. Iowa at Purdue. Iowa's favored by 3 points. This one's a coin flip game, I think, too, here.
Mm-hmm.
Over under here is 52.5. But they have Iowa by 3. Of course, Rondell Moore coming back to Purdue. That's huge.
That is massive for them.
He was one of the first guys to opt out, not only in the Big Ten, but in college football.
Yeah.
He did this 4 or 5 months ago, it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Purdue, no matter who goes to Purdue, it's always a tough game. No matter who you are. I can speak from experience. 2 years ago yesterday, I was at the Ohio State game when they lost at Purdue. We can just go past that.
We can move on if that's
we can move on. But yeah, it's not even who bought the naming rights. Bob Rohrman Auto Group. He bought the naming rights to the Ross-Ade Stadium.
Okay.
So it's a new name this year, but again, no fans. But I think this is a game too where Kirk Ferentz, I think his job may be on the hot seat in the next year or so.
I think so. I think you look at what he's done the last couple of years with his program. It's they're hot early, and then they just fall apart. They made the Big Ten championship, 2 years ago?
Penn State. Yeah, they lost against Penn State, I believe.
Yeah, so So, I mean, obviously, that's your goal, is to get to that game if you're a Big Ten team. Obviously, your goal is really to win it. But if you're in the Big Ten, your goal is to get there. And he just hasn't done anything since. I mean, you look at the scores from last season. I mean, he had some great games down the stretch. He won his last 4 in a row, including a win over then number 8 Minnesota, beating Illinois, beating Nebraska, and then the bowl game against USC, 49-24. I mean, they ripped USC in that game.
They did.
But when it comes to playing elite talent, they just fall apart, and that's their thing.
They're also one of those teams when they're playing elite talent, they can beat them. They did it to Ohio State in 2017.
Yeah,
Ohio State went to Iowa and they waxed us out there.
Yeah.
So, and Kinnick Stadium's a tough place to play.
Oh yeah. Well, I think part of it's a psychological thing with the whole locker room being pink, and like, you know, they make it a really tiny locker room, make it pink just to be intimidating. That stadium is always rocking with the fans. Like, it's a great environment.
And I think the stadium looks cool on TV at prime time.
Mm-hmm.
Like the black and gold does look really good on TV.
Sure.
Later on, but I'm going to take Iowa in this game. I just think experience. Purdue was down a lot last year. They had such high hopes for them.
Yeah.
And they did not come to fruition with what they thought they could do. And but I mean, looking at Purdue's schedule here, you know, it's fairly easy, to be honest. They have Iowa, Illinois, at Wisconsin, home for Northwestern, at Minnesota, home for Rutgers, Nebraska, then at IU. So they could easily get 5-6 wins out of the schedule.
Looking at it right now. Yeah. I mean, you know, if you drop Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa, you're still picking up 5 wins against Illinois, Northwestern, Rutgers, Nebraska, and IU. Like, that's not a terrible season if you're Purdue going 5-3. That's, I mean, in a normal season, that's probably 7-4.
Yeah. As long as you're above 500.
Yeah.
We move down the list here to probably the most boring and unintriguing game of the week. That's Maryland at Northwestern.
Yeah.
Northwestern favored by 11 points. Let me go down here real quick. Oh, they don't even have. Oh, here we go. Over unders 55. I'm taking that under.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that's intriguing about this game to me is the new quarterback at Maryland, Tua's brother.
Oh yeah, that's right. He just transferred, didn't he?
He did, yeah. That's really the only thing that intrigues me about this. Nebraska. Northwestern here, 89.7% to Maryland's 10.3.
Mm.
You know, this is just one of those games that both teams are just down. You know, and it's so crazy because 2 years ago, Northwestern was in the Big Ten championship, not because they were good, but because the West was so bad.
Yeah, the West just all they did was beat up on each other, and Northwestern got the benefit of winning the games they needed to when they needed to. And then, yeah, like you said, the tiebreakers, they went down quite a few tiebreakers because there were a lot of teams who were in contention, but Northwestern just got it.
Yeah. So, yeah, right here, like I said, 11-point spread, over under 55, hammering that under extremely. But you look at Northwestern's last 5 here. They won at Illinois, lost to Minnesota, beat UMass, lost to Purdue, and lost to IU. And Maryland here, the same thing. They lost their last 5 and got throttled by Ohio State 73-14. I was at that game. And then the week after, they get throttled by Nebraska 54-7. And then Minnesota beat them 52-10. And they barely lost to Sparty 19-16. So, yeah, that game to me is just the most boring. Like, there's nothing that screams appeal to me to this game right here, unfortunately. But you know what? I'm going to watch it because it's going to be on at 7:30 on the Big Ten Network. So I will be watching.
Well, exactly. I mean, and it's one of those things you can't not watch it. As somebody who's been starved for Big Ten football, like, you know, I'm watching all these other games with these other conferences, and that's been fun. But it's Big Ten football. It's football we love, football we know. It's football I want to see, even if it is an ugly game between two ugly-looking programs. I think, honestly, you know, we're talking about Maryland. I think Maryland maybe wins a game this year, and that's maybe Rutgers. It just depends on what Greg Schiano does.
Yeah. Well, it's just, look at their schedule right here, and they've got a tough schedule.
Mm-hmm.
They've got Northwestern this week, then Minnesota, then Penn
Mm-hmm.
State, Ohio State, Michigan State, IU, Michigan, Rutgers.
Yeah.
That's a gauntlet right there.
Well, I mean, yeah, you look at, you get Minnesota, Penn State, Ohio State back to back to back.
Yeah.
That's just not fair to anybody, let alone a team who's already not top tier in the conference.
Exactly. That's tough. Now, going from the most intriguing or least intriguing game of the week to probably one of the most intriguing, Michigan at Minnesota.
Sure.
Michigan's 3-point favorites, prime time on ABC Saturday night, 7:30. This game can go both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the matchup predictors here, Michigan's favorite at 55.8 to Minnesota's 44.2. Over/unders 55. As I said, Michigan is 3-point favorites. This is an interesting one.
This is a big one early.
Yeah, and for being a week 1 game,
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota is one of those teams that's on the rise, and nobody really knows what Michigan's about. They'll have a
Right.
starting brand new quarterback this year, Milton.
Yep.
And so, we've seen a little bit of him over the years,
Mm-hmm.
sprinkled in here and there, but outside of that, not really sure what they have going on. And Minnesota has a returning quarterback in Tanner Morgan.
Well,
who's
yeah,
been solid quarterback.
I was going to say, you look at Tanner Morgan's season last year, and I mean, he broke a lot of Minnesota records, and he did a lot of good things under PJ Fleck. And I think this is the first time Michigan and Minnesota are playing since PJ Fleck has taken over in Minnesota, and that's just because of how the conference schedules and stuff play out. It's either the first or second time, but either way.
Yeah.
I trust PJ Fleck to make this an interesting game. You've got with Michigan, like you mentioned, you've got Joe Milton. We haven't seen much of him. We've seen a little bit of him over the last 2 years. But I think what Michigan's going to really need to rely on is Giles Jackson, one of the wide receivers. He's a big return man, which is critical for them. Zach Charbonnet and Hassan Haskins, the 2 running backs. I think that's what you're going to have to rely on in this game to just ground and pound and grind it out against a strong Minnesota team. You're not going to win with a big flashy play. You're going to win by let's repeatedly pound the ball. Let's make this a grind game. Let's make you work for it for 60 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Last year we're talking about Tanner Morgan. He threw for 3,253 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 7 picks.
Yeah.
With a completion percentage of 66 exactly. So he averaged 10.2 yards a throw. So, I mean, he really, really is a solid quarterback as a junior. 6'2", 215. Interesting how they got him out of Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to throw one down there and got him. But yeah, Michigan's too, they were also hit by the opt-out bug this year too.
Yeah.
Nico Collins was an offensive lineman or defensive lineman also.
I think one of both, actually.
One of both, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's be really interesting to look at. You look at Michigan's schedule, theirs isn't easy either here. In Minnesota, Michigan State, IU, Wisconsin, Rutgers, Penn State, Maryland, and Ohio State.
Yeah.
So they're another team that's going to be going through the gauntlet this year within these 8 games. And, this game right here is just kind of a toss-up. It's an 18 versus a 21. Easily Minnesota could be ranked higher. I mean, I don't think that's too far to speculate. I think they really could.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, and that's the thing is, I think honestly, if I'm looking at this Michigan schedule, I think Michigan probably drops 2 games. And when I say drops 2 games, I think that this Minnesota game will be very competitive, but I think this is a game, since they are traveling up to Minnesota, this could be a game Michigan drops, and that would just be how the season starts. It's a rivalry game. It's a big primetime game. There's a lot on the line with this one. So I think this is one that Tanner Morgan, being the more experienced quarterback over Joe Milton, is going to have the opportunity to really say, hey, this is how we're doing it. We're going to win on my home turf, and they're going to get the little brown jug back. I think that'll be exciting to see for Minnesota. But I think it'll hopefully, if you're Michigan and you're Michigan fans, you hope that it lights a fire, under them to get momentum and to push forward, to try to grind out 6-7 wins down the road, ultimately playing Ohio State. That one, I think, that's a game they lose, unfortunately. And And we'll talk about Ohio State here in a minute, but I just think Ohio State is just miles ahead of everybody else in the conference, and they have been for several years, thanks in part to Urban Meyer and his recruiting. And now you hand the reins over to Ryan Day, not Jim Day. Jim Day is the announcer for the Reds. Ryan Day, who is just absolutely he's passed the litmus test, at least in his first year. I think this next year, now he's starting to get some of his own recruits in. This is going to be a more telling year as to what he can do, because you see it all across college football all the time, right? Guys will do really well with the players from the previous coach. You know, it happened with Michigan with Jim Harbaugh when he took over for Brady Hoke. Happened with Brady Hoke when he took over for Rich Rod. I mean, you just see what they do with those guys who aren't even their recruits. They have to re-recruit them. Now you're starting to get some of your recruits into the fold. All right, let's see what you can do with the guys that you bring into the program. And I think Ryan Day's doing a phenomenal job of that, honestly. Again, we'll talk about Ohio State in a minute, but I think that Michigan will probably drop 2 games this year, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them drop this first game of the season.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's get into that game here. Nebraska, they threatened to file a lawsuit against the Big Ten. So what's the Big Ten say? We'll schedule you against Ohio State week 1.
Yes, they did.
That's what they did. Noon on Fox on Saturday. Nebraska travels to Columbus to play the number 5 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. So I'm interested to see this. After Ohio State plays a game, how far will they jump from 5 to 2? Because everybody knows they're like that number 2 team behind Clemson.
Sure.
And so I'm curious to see if it takes one game. Say, okay, they played. We'll put them at number 2. I'm really curious to see how that works out here. But the over-under here is 67.5.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of points.
That is a crap load of points.
That's a lot of points. And they have Ohio State favored by 26 points here. But yeah, 67.5 points is a lot.
That's well, and I think that's the thing too, right? Is you look at Nebraska and what they've got, what they're bringing to the table. You've got the entire conference heated at you right now because you're like, oh, we're gonna file a lawsuit, we're gonna do whatever. This conference is not happy with anything that Nebraska said, anything Nebraska's doing. Good luck, Nebraska. You've screwed yourself on this. And I mean, their schedule is not even that favorable if you really look at it.
No, it's not. They have Ohio State, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Penn State, Illinois, Nebraska, Iowa, Purdue, Minnesota.
Like if you can survive the first 4 games of that schedule, because 3 of the first 4 are ranked in the top 15.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Illinois, who can be a trap game. Iowa is always tough. Like we said, at Purdue, not easy to win there. And then versus, again, a top 25 Minnesota, you have 4 of your 8 games are ranked against top 25 opponents. Congratulations. You've done this to yourself.
Right. And this is one of those games too, or I think maybe not. Yeah, maybe game actually, where Scott Frost, he was supposed to come in there and change the culture, change the program because he's a former quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
But he hasn't done anything since he's been there.
No.
He hasn't had a marquee win. Ohio State traveled there last year and just beat the brakes off them.
Mm-hmm.
I think their quarterback, their first 3 possessions, Martinez, he threw 3 picks in their first 3 possessions, or first 4 or something like that.
Yeah, it was dumb.
And the game was over by halftime.
Mm-hmm.
And so Nebraska is one of those teams that the first year they joined the Big Ten with Bo Pelini as their coach, they went to the Big Ten championship against Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember who won that. That was
2000. No, that was the first year the Big Ten championship existed, right?
Yeah.
So Michigan State played Wisconsin in that one because of tiebreakers, because Nebraska was in the same division as.
That's right.
Yeah. So Nebraska's played in one, but they didn't. But they made it there off of whatever it was, the 1 year off of, because I think Penn State and Ohio State were both not eligible for postseason play.
That's probably
yeah. But they were like 4th in the conference or 4th in the division.
Yeah.
And the only reason they got to go is because of sanctions against other teams.
That's right.
Which is,
I just remember that Kenny Bell, that receiver, getting rocked.
Yep.
That's the only reason I remember it. But yeah, this is one of those games too. Obviously, I'm excited to watch Ohio State football on TV. 67.5 points is a lot. Will they reach it? Probably. Will they go over it? Probably. With what I've seen with Justin Fields and Trey Sermon, who was a transfer running back from Oklahoma this year, and Master T, who was in the program last year as well.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Olave is probably one of the best receivers in the country. Garrett Wilson, who's a sophomore, had a phenomenal freshman season. A couple other freshman receivers coming in. And the thing is, one thing good about Ohio State is they don't like to redshirt. If you're a freshman and you can play, they're going to play you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're going to do with a lot of these guys. All the offensive line's back. Wyatt Davis came back. He opted out, but he decided to come back. Sean Wade, same thing. He decided to come back as a defensive back. Mm-hmm. He's a first-round pick. So is Wyatt Davis. So those are one of those games, too, where you look at Ohio State's schedule here. They got Nebraska week 1, Penn State week 2 at Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be so weird watching that game. It's primetime on ABC, and it's not a whiteout. Like, that's going to be so weird.
That's going to be insane. Not because nobody's used to that. We're all used to seeing, that night game, that atmosphere. And that's what makes playing in Happy Valley such a difficult thing, because you're going up against not only the team who's consistently good, but then now you're having to take on 8,000 fans all dressed in white, screaming at the top of their lungs. It's intimidating. And, just watching it on TV, I'm always intimidated.
Oh, yeah. Because then we have Rutgers, Maryland, IU, Illinois, Michigan State, then Michigan. So I don't think there's a loss in there, honestly.
Ohio State had a really, really good schedule in terms of what they got this year. It was very kind to them. But again, I think it's because there's lack of divisional parity, right? You look at Michigan and Penn State are your two toughest games this year. And honestly, I think, like I mentioned earlier, I don't think Michigan's going to pose much of a challenge for Ohio State in that game. It's, one, it's Ohio State gets to host it. Two, by that time, Michigan has had a little bit of a gauntlet of a schedule. Three, if Ohio State somehow loses to Penn State at Penn State, which is possible, I think that's probably the toughest game on their schedule, honestly.
Yep.
But if they lose that game, you better believe Ryan Day is saying we're not losing another game the rest of the year. It's, there's just no way.
No. And, like you said, the schedule is favorable. And the Big Ten probably did that and on purpose. Like, let's be real here.
Sure.
They probably did because they want their team to, this is the best team in the conference. They probably want them in the playoffs.
Sure.
And they can manipulate their schedule like that. Might as well do it.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
So we covered all the games. Let's go back down the list. We'll give a prediction and if you'll take the over-under.
Cool. I'm down with that.
Let's go back. We'll start with the Friday night. Illinois at Wisconsin, as I mentioned. Over-under here is 51. You taking the over-under, and who do you got winning?
Illinois at Wisconsin. I've got Wisconsin winning this, and I'm taking the over. I think Wisconsin is going to give up some points that they shouldn't give up, but I see no reason for Wisconsin to slow down. This is a revenge game for them. I think Wisconsin beats the brakes off of them, and I think it's in blowout fashion. I think it's probably 35-7 at halftime, probably 55-14 at the end of the game.
Yeah, I'd do the same. If this game was at Illinois, I'd my mind, I would still have Wisconsin winning it, but I'd probably take the under if it was at Illinois, but being at a Happy Valley at Camp Randall. Yeah, I definitely I'll take that over too. Give me those points here.
Absolutely.
Rutgers, Michigan State. Michigan State is favored by 13.5. You over up. There's no over under on this one. They haven't given a line yet, so we'll have to keep an eye out on that. But nevertheless, Michigan State is favored by 13.5.
Then I gotta go Michigan State.
Yeah, the game's at East Lansing.
Yeah, I think that's a no-brainer then. Michigan State is there. Rutgers is not going to be a team that's going to go into East Lansing and win. Not with Greg Schiano just now coming back to the program. He's been away long enough that he doesn't even have any of his old guys there anymore.
Yeah,
like this is a good opportunity for Michigan State to get a decent win to start the season, set the season on the right track, get going, lock in, get focused, get the first conference win out of the way, and move forward from there.
Yeah. And, the Schiano hire is interesting to me for the simple fact that he was at Ohio State for a few years, and that was Ryan Day's first fire when he was hired.
Yep.
Because of his defense. Like, he runs too much of a complicated pro-style defense. It didn't work in college.
Right. Well, it didn't work for Ohio State. Yeah.
It's
Ohio State was getting gashed Granted, Ohio State's offense was explosive enough that it didn't matter. But
Right.
when you go to play like a Clemson or an Alabama in postseason, getting gashed is going to matter if their defense is stopping your offense. So
Absolutely. And that'll be it'll be interesting to follow this year. Penn State at IU. Penn State's favored by 6.5. The over under is 59.
See, I think knowing Penn State and knowing what they do down there or over there in Happy Valley and all that, I think Penn State really they're going to blow this game. They're going to blow them out early, but then they're just going to coast. I think Indiana's going to try to claw back in, but I think Penn State's just going to keep it just out of reach. I see, 42-14.
Yeah, I'm going to take Penn State in this one, but I'm taking the under. Under 59 points. I think IU is one of those scrappy enough teams to where they can irritate Penn State's offense.
Sure.
And Tom Allen down there going into his second year as a head coach, third year as head coach.
Third year, yeah.
Third year, yeah. I think he's got, he has some of his own guys in there now. And I think with what he's been able to build, because they are consistent down there, I need to learn to finish games.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but yeah, I'll still take Penn State, but I'm also going to take the under on this one.
Okay. I like it.
Because you got to look at it too. Penn State's only favored by 6 points.
Sure. I mean, I do expect Penn State's going to blow them out, but it's college football. It's the first game of the season for these guys. Anything can happen. So
absolutely. Your next game on your Iowa at Purdue. Iowa's favored by 3. Over under is 52.5.
That sounds about right. I'm taking the over. I'm taking Iowa as well, but I'm taking the over. I think that there's going to be a lot of fireworks in this game. There's just no way that this isn't an offensive barrage. The Iowa defense has been stellar, but I just don't know. I mean, I really think that this one is going to be a lot of points on the scoreboard. It's going to come down to a field goal. I do like Iowa in this one, but I think Iowa probably wins it. I'm going to say 35-33, or 35-33, 35-32. I really do think this one is going to come down to a last-second field goal or whoever has the ball last.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm going to take Iowa on this one as well, and I think it's going to be high scoring. I think for Purdue, Rondell Moore, he was hurt all last year, so a lot of this is going to be put on him.
Big time game for him.
Big time game for him. He missed, I think, most of last year. He only played maybe a handful of games, if that.
Like 3 games maybe.
Yeah, if that. But Iowa's still one of those teams that they're always going to be competitive. But Purdue, once they find their traction, find their footing, I think they'll put up points, but Iowa will just put up just enough. But yeah, I'd take that over to a 52.5.
Sure.
We go down here to Maryland, Northwestern, kind of what we mentioned, the most unintriguing game of the week. That's at Northwestern. The over-under is 55, and Northwestern is favored by 11 points.
I don't think it'll get that high scoring overall, but I do think that Northwestern being the favorite by that little is surprising. I think that this is a game Maryland's not going to hang with them. I think it'll be interesting, like you mentioned earlier, Tua's brother being the quarterback at Maryland now. But I just think there's a lot that they have to fix at Maryland. I think Northwestern notches that first W in their belt. They're not even really worried about this game. I think that Northwestern wins this game probably by 14-21.
I was going to say Northwestern here, maybe like a 28-14 final score. I think this game just has punt written all over it.
Yep.
A lot of 3-and-outs. So I'm taking that under. I need to find a prop bet on how many punts there will be in this game, because I guarantee you there will be. Because what Northwestern does is they still play on grass. So they grow that grass out and make the opposing team slower.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm taking the under on that one. We'll go back over here to Michigan at Minnesota. Michigan's 3-point favorites, over under 55.
This one's a tough one for me because both of these programs, if you look at them on paper, it's pretty evenly matched. This is not, nobody really has an advantage. I would say maybe Michigan has an advantage just because they have a lot of experience on offense and defense returning, and Jim Harbaugh does well against opponents he should beat. Although PJ Fleck has looked really good in his first couple years. This is now his 4th season at Minnesota. PJ Fleck looks really good. I don't know. I'm going to go This is heart reaction. I'm going to go Michigan. I am going to say it is going to come down to a last second possession, but I do think this is going to be more of a defensive game than an offensive game. I'm thinking, I don't know. Let's go 24-21.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, this one I'm taking Minnesota just because I like Tanner Morgan.
Okay.
I mean, he's the more experienced quarterback in this game.
Sure.
Threw for 3,000 yards last year, which I mean in Minnesota isn't a ton. And it was snowing in Minnesota 2 days ago, so who knows what the weather's going to be like there this week.
Right.
They're kind of, we'll see the forecast here. Yeah, they're looking for snow and 33. Advantage Minnesota. So I think Minnesota on this one just because I like Tanner Morgan, I like PJ Fleck.
Mhm.
He's one of those guys too where if he can win this kind of game, this kind of puts him in that upper echelon of Big Ten coaches.
Sure.
So I think he's flirting with that line right there, being in the conversation of Ryan Day. You could probably throw
James Franklin.
Franklin. You could probably throw a Kirk Ferentz in there too because he has a long history.
A long history of being relatively successful, yeah.
Yeah. And so, but yeah, I think PJ Fleck's flirting with that line right now. And I think a win like this could be huge for him.
Sure.
Especially coming after a let's see here. Yeah, they beat Auburn last year, and that's no joke in the bowl game. And so, but yeah, I like Minnesota in this one. And I think it's cool too. I think they're going to take into consideration the players anyway. Prime time, ABC, Herbie, and those guys are going to be calling that game.
It's going to be fun.
So that's a huge for Minnesota because that doesn't happen there very often.
No, it doesn't.
And it's a trophy game. So for the
Exactly.
little brown jug. All right, the last game of the Big Ten, Nebraska at Ohio State. Ohio State's favored by 26 points. As we mentioned in the over-under here, is 67.5.
Is that enough points for them to be favored by? I don't think it is.
No, probably not. Yeah, this is one of those games where it'll be over by the end of the first quarter, I think.
Sure. I'd say if not by the end of the first quarter, definitely halftime. I think first quarter in every single one of these games, we're going to see these teams adjusting for the first time. Like, okay, we're not playing our practice squad anymore. We're not playing our own defense. We're not playing our own offense. We're playing somebody we haven't seen before. First quarter is going to be really slow for every single one of these games. The second quarter and on is going to be where the floodgates are going to bust wide open.
Yeah, absolutely. Or Northwestern. Excuse me, I can't talk tonight. Nebraska, coming to Ohio State week 1, that's tough.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only going to be like 1,200 fans there.
Yep.
But that's something we'll get into after this. But yeah, 26 points. I'll take. Give me the points. Give me the over.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ohio State could put up 67 if they really wanted to by themselves.
Oh, easy.
So
easy.
But those are our picks here. I did want to get into this though, and that is the capacity for the stadiums.
Yes.
This week. So Ohio State could have hosted 20,000 people, but the Big Ten's not allowing it because not every Big Ten school can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So they want to keep consistency across the board.
Sure.
So there's going to be 1,200, I think, in the Horseshoe. I think is what I read.
That's annoying.
Yeah, agree. Yeah. So, hopefully, as the year goes on, maybe we'll get a couple more here and there because that's what they've done in the NFL. Every week most teams have gotten progressively more and more fans. But when you talk about social distancing, I mean, you can social distance there easily.
Yeah, I think, and here's the thing, right, is, you're talking about 20% capacity, 20,000 fans at the Horseshoe. That's the problem with having a stadium the size of the Horseshoe or the Big House or, Happy Valley. Those are 3 of the top 5 football cathedrals in college football right now. Every other Big Ten stadium is under 90,000.
Yeah.
So when it comes to this kind of stuff, you don't get that luxury of having an extra 9,000 fans that, let's say, if you go to Purdue, they hold 70,000, 20% of that, they're not even getting, 12,000 fans, so you do have to play to that, which sucks, but it's also, I don't think it's fair to the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Penn States who have these massive cathedrals. That's not their fault that the regulations are set up in such a way that those stadiums can't have the fans that they want. One, now you're costing those stadiums and those schools money because you think about it, Ohio State sells 8,000 more tickets at $70 a pop. That's a lot of dough for, 4 home games. I think it's a dumb move and a poor move on behalf of the Big Ten. I get it. You want to keep it fair. You don't want anybody to have an overly distinct home field advantage. If you didn't want that, take them all to Indianapolis, have them all play. Like that's my thing. If you really didn't want any kind of home field advantage, either eliminate all the fans or put them in a neutral site.
That, and they're not even doing marching bands.
Right.
So there will be no Script, Ohio. There will be no tunnel, in Michigan. There'll be nothing. So I'm just really curious to see what this does and how it looks. And like we said, maybe towards the middle of the year, some of these things change, with guidelines and whatnot. Who knows?
Right.
The first few weeks are going to be extremely interesting to watch. We talked about, the Ohio State at Penn State week 2. It's prime time, ABC, and it's in a normal world, it would be a whiteout and it'd be the biggest game in the country.
Right.
That's not going to be the case.
No, not at all. It's going to be interesting. I'm excited to see what's going to happen with these games. It's going to be really interesting because it's not going to come down to any kind of home field advantage at all. It's going to come down to, all right, who's ready to play? Who's here to play? Let's just play some football. I mean, yeah, you'll get like the home announcers and things like that. I'm sure they'll probably play the home fight song through the speakers after scores. But no, this is going to be a season less about home field advantage and more about who just wants it more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. And, I think we'll be able to tell very quickly, teams who are ready and teams who aren't.
Mm-hmm.
And, the teams who have younger players, younger quarterbacks, maybe a new coach, like a few programs do. Those would be the teams that'd be really interesting to watch the first 2-3 weeks, I think.
Sure.
How they adjust to game speed, because they should have been playing 2 months ago. Here we are 2 months behind. So I'm really curious to see what happens. And, we talked about it too, not having those warm-up games, not playing the Max or the Sun Belts or anything like that, Conference USA teams. So what kind of impact does that have? I don't know if it has too much, because you can look at some of the Big Ten teams as the types of programs.
Mm-hmm.
The Rutgers, the Marylands, the Northwesterns, they are those MAC and Sun Belt style teams.
Sure.
They're just, so it'd be interesting to see what the first couple weeks here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know you're excited. It's going to be a lot of fun to see what's going to happen, who's going to do what. There's just so much writing on this season and how it's going to kind of turn out. There's just, I don't know. It's going to be really interesting with just who's going to do what. Now, I think obviously we have to predict a conference championship game. I think it's safe to say Ohio State makes it, but who makes it out of the West?
Coin toss.
Yeah. I think Wisconsin or Minnesota are probably the favorites. But I think that past that, it's very, very difficult to, I don't know. It's very difficult to say if anybody has an opportunity, or it's very difficult to say that people are going to be successful enough to rise up. I mean, we could have somebody brand new who's never even been in there before. Like,
Sure.
you just don't know. But I think that, well, I was just going to say, I think that, again, Minnesota and Wisconsin are the heavy favorites in the division, but I wouldn't be surprised to see somebody else jump up and pull out a surprising win, like in Illinois, like in Indiana, jump up and say, hey, no, we're going to make a run at it. I think Indiana could have a legitimate case to say, hey, we've got a shot at this.
Sure. And I think, obviously we're both clear that Ohio State will win the East,
Mm-hmm.
or is a clear favorite. But I think Minnesota does pull out of the West. I think they're on that level now. If they can get a win week 1,
Mm-hmm.
I think that shoots them into the stratosphere, and they can maybe run the table in the West.
You think ride that high for 7 more weeks?
I think they can. It's better. It's easier to do it the 7 weeks than it is 13 weeks.
Sure. And it's a bigger opponent right off the rip.
Sure. And you look at PJ Fleck's energy, the row the boat, the ski Uma type thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think he could have those guys energized. Get a big win week 1. I think he's one of the few coaches in college football who could keep that high for 7 weeks straight.
Yeah.
So they're my favorite out of the West. They ended well last. I mean, they could have won it last year. Wisconsin just got hot at the right time. But yeah, I think Minnesota. I think they've got a legit shot. And, you think about it too. The Big Ten plays late into December this year, so there's snow on the ground in December. Anybody who goes, no matter where you're from in the Midwest, if you go to Minnesota, it's a different kind of cold.
Right.
So that advantage is to the Golden Gophers, whoever goes there.
Right.
So I'll be really curious to see how they finish those last 2 weeks of the year, late November, early December.
Yeah. I think that's going to be part of it too, is now you've got how many of these games are shifted too. That's you look at Ohio State, Michigan, that's a lot later than what it's been in the past. Not a lot later, but enough later that weather's going to be a much bigger factor than it has been in recent years. Fortunately for like the Ohio State Michigans, they're playing at Ohio State, but when you have to travel to Wisconsin or to Minnesota at night, that's going to be brisk.
Ooh, that's going to be cold.
That's going to be real brisk.
Even November, when there's snow and it's 38 degrees, that's cold. Like, I was talking to my brother a couple days ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, he and I were at Ohio State, Penn State in Columbus, the blackout game. And, mid-October, and we were on the upper deck and it was cold.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what it's like. It's going to be like in December in Minnesota or Wisconsin. Oh, gosh, that just sounds awful. I don't even want to think about it.
Let me look at this real quick because now I'm really, really curious. They don't have times for any games past the 31st, except for Iowa and Minnesota, which is at 7:30. That's at Minnesota, November 13th, 7:30 p.m. That's a cold one.
That's a football game right there.
Then you've got Michigan at Ohio State, December 12th, 2 weeks later than normal, at noon, which obviously we all know that. That's a noon game. That's a staple. But, oh, man, if you're the Big Ten, you can't schedule too many night games past the 13th of November.
No.
You really can't. Like, it's...
Oh, especially if you're going to Minnesota.
Or, like Wisconsin, like that's just... Or even East Lansing. That's in Central Michigan. Like
even Northwestern, right off Lake Michigan.
Oof. Ooh, buddy.
Oof. The lake's usually frozen by that point.
Oh yeah. Oh man, no, thank you.
Oof.
No, thank you. That's awful.
That's weird. And of course, Northwestern's one of those fields that's grass, and they don't have heaters under it, so it's just it's just gonna be cold grass you're playing on. Oh. That sounds awful.
Yeah,
because I remember, I think a couple years ago, the Vikings, when they were building their new facility, they had to play at the University of Minnesota.
Yep.
And of course, those games run late in January, February, and they didn't have heaters under their field. I think the Vikings bought heaters and put them under the turf for Minnesota just so they didn't freeze.
God.
Because I think, wasn't that game? Oh, who was the kicker for Minnesota? Blair Walsh.
Yeah.
Did he miss like a big time kick?
Yeah, he did.
It was at University of Minnesota. The Blair Walsh Project. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. Wow.
Yeah, at the University of Minnesota, and it was blistering cold.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you. No, thank you. Oh man, I'm cold just thinking about it right now.
But I'm excited. Big Ten football's back on TV Friday night with Illinois at Wisconsin.
Gonna be fun.
Fighting Lovie Smiths. It's the Badgers. It's finally here.
Dude.
We've got MAC. They got the MAC coming in a few weeks. I'm really upset about the MAC. We'll get to do it here later on in our next episode. But so many CBS Sports Network games. Mm-hmm. I don't have CBS Sports Network.
Yeah, that's really frustrating. And, like you said, we'll talk about this next week. Maybe with a little surprise for people. We'll let you guys know. We'll keep you posted. But yeah, there's a lot that we could talk about with how the MAC and their schedule worked out. Not happy with it. But like you said, finally, Big Ten football is back. We have waited so long for it. We are here for it. I'm pumped, man.
Absolutely not. And that's how I was supposed to get married this weekend, but
Mm-hmm.
we had to postpone, and we have a silver lining. Ohio State football's on TV,
There you
so
go.
it's not all bad.
Well, and now you can tell your fiance, hey, look, now I don't have to worry about watching football during the wedding. You got a
Right,
free pass this weekend.
right. Her and I are going away for the weekend, so I have to figure out how to watch it somehow. So
Oh man, so I think that's going to be about do it for me. I don't know if you have
yep,
anything else you want to tack on.
that's all. I'm all set, man. We thank you guys for following us on our social media. Our social media following is growing every day, so we're excited about that.
Sure.
Continue to interact with us. We just like to throw random, dumb, stupid questions out there. Have you guys answer them. One thing Alex and I have been doing the past couple of days is going on YouTube and watching football games from the early '90s or late '90s, early 2000s. It's been a
Sure.
blast. And
So many old names that just come back,
oh,
that
it's
just come
wild, isn't
flooding
it?
back.
It's wild. And then they see a play that get your blood going again. And
Oh yeah.
so,
Oh yeah.
I do that when I do cardio until I get through cardio in the gym. It works. But yeah, thank you guys for your support. We're going to continue to grow this thing. We've got a lot of big things in store here in the next couple of months, especially with football season. Football season helps tremendously.
Yeah.
But if you haven't, go back and listen to our former or past shows. Coach Tisdale was a blast. Coach Fleck from Ball State Golf was a blast.
Yeah.
Chris Wormley, Pittsburgh Steelers, he was on there. He was a blast.
I actually reposted that episode with us leading into the preview for tonight, just saying,
awesome.
hey,
Good
people,
deal.
hey, we, remember we talked with the former Michigan Wolverine and, his time at Michigan and his time in the NFL. So I reposted that, hoping people check that out, kind of relive that interview with us, because that was a lot of fun having Chris on the show.
It was, yeah. We'll have to get him back on. I talked to him last night, actually. I'll have to get him back on here at some point.
Sure.
It's hard for those guys during the middle of the season, but maybe we can do like
He's a little busy right now.
A little bit, yeah. Maybe we can do like a post Big Ten season talk with him or something like that.
That'd be fun.
But yeah, guys, go back and listen to those. Make sure you like, comment. If you're gonna comment, make it a real comment. You know our rules on that. Outside of that, I'm all set.
Cool. Well, hey guys, thank you so much for all the support. AJ and I really, AJ, first off, we're almost at a year, man. Like, this is crazy that we've come this far. So guys, thank you so much for your support. We really do.
And one thing I did want to mention though first is here in Indiana, sectional football starts this week. Yes. So make sure you guys keep an eye on that. That'll be fun to watch. It's hard to believe it's that part of the year already.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, sectional football will be starting here this week. So
I'm not sure. I think the real Ohio playoffs are kind of starting this week, because the last 2 weeks were kind of a crapshoot because everybody in Ohio got in. They played, I think, a 6-game regular season schedule, and then everybody made the postseason. So you had to get past the first 2 weeks to kind of filter out the teams who have no business being in the playoffs. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. And Ohio does theirs so it's so weird.
Yeah. So it's good to see that now we're going to get some higher quality high school playoff football here in Ohio. So
absolutely.
Football all around, it's back, and we're glad to have it back.
Absolutely. So partner, that's it for me.
Cool. Well, hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you get the chance, please, please, please follow us on Twitter. Like AJ mentioned, you can find us at College Sport Pod. We definitely want to keep interacting with you guys, definitely keep growing. We're thinking about adding other social media outlets. We may be asking you guys for your input, see where you guys would follow us, things like that. We have a Facebook page as well. You can follow us there, the College Sports Connection Podcast. AJ and I are constantly tweeting and reposting different things. You can follow myself at SheerDumbLuck. You can follow AJ at Roughing55. Then we got our buddies over at the Beard Brothers Fantasy Football Podcast. They haven't had much content come out lately. They've been super busy. Give them some love. Show them that you guys still care about them and want to hear from them. You can find them at Beard Bros FF. You can follow our other friends over at the Mac Bandwagon Podcast. You can follow them. They've got some great content. They're posting out some good podcasts, always posting some new stuff. They're part of Hustle Belt, who is part of Sports Nation. And so guys, we definitely appreciate the support. We love it. We can't wait for Big Ten football to come back this weekend. And that's going to about do it for us. So thank you guys so much. And we will see you next week.
See you.